Today's saint actually will be celebrated tomorrow, October the 19th, the feast of St. Peter of Alcantara. For our particular Franciscan community, this Feast of St. Peter holds a very special place. He is the patron of our province and therefore holds a very high honor or place in all of what we do. Here is the biography, the background of St. Peter. This glorious discipline of poverty and penance, who was born in Alcantara in Spain, took the habit of the discalced friars minor at the age of 16, and from thenceforth practiced the most fearful mortifications. For 40 years, according to St. Teresa, he slept an hour and a half only every night. For 46 years, he chastised himself every night, scourging him so severely that the floor and the wall of his cell were covered with blood. For 20 years, he wore a hair shirt of iron, whose sharp points tore into his flesh. He strove to restore the original severity and discipline of the Franciscan order. He also offered great assistance to St. Teresa in her reform of the Carmelites. He devoted himself to preaching for 16 years, and this bore abundant fruit everywhere. St. Peter of Alcantara left this earth at the age of 63. After his death, he appeared to St. Teresa, shining with glory, and said to her, "O happy penance, which won for me such great glory." St. Peter is one of those saints that, understood correctly, we celebrate very highly. And Catholics are often encouraged to imitate the saints. Now with St. Peter, we have to imitate him in his virtues. One would have to be very cautious about following his example of penances. As I just read, the penances and mortifications were so severe that you find even in the history of the church, there were only a small number of people who even attempted to do things that St. Peter did. And so we look at his virtues, and it really is a situation where he should be the encouragement for us to want to do penance. Now we live in a world where the world itself will pretty much mock the idea of doing penance, because the world does not understand. The world goes out and tells you to eat, drink, and be merry, and not worry about anything else. And we know that that's simply not true. We're called upon to be faithful servants. We're called upon to be holy saints. Through all of our faults and our failings, we must continually strive to do that which is necessary for our own salvation. In the life of St. Peter, we see constant penance. There have been certain saints that have been called upon to do just that. And as a result, the example that we take from him, not only do we look upon it with great admiration and with, understood correctly, with great humility, but with a word of caution, don't try to imitate him literally. Because when you look at just a couple of the things that he did, he slept only for an hour and a half every night. There aren't too many people that will even attempt that. but he was able to discipline his body in such a way that that was accomplished. Or the scourging himself to blood regularly. This is something that almost no one, I shouldn't say no one, but very few really understand. Even among Catholics, the idea of scourging yourself is quite misunderstood. And yet, there have been many, many saints that did just this. And usually with great results. Why would you do that? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, to overcome any temptations, especially temptations of the flesh, that may be there. Secondly, to prevent these temptations from even appearing at times. And really to subject the body and to make up for the sins of the individual. It's not to say that the saints were great sinners, because that's usually not the case. But in their mind, they were sinners, and they wanted to make up for all of what they did. But the saints also would take it a step further. They would perform penance for the sake of others. And there are many different ways you can look at that. They can have certain people in mind, or they could have society in general, or in the case of St. Peter, who was reforming the Franciscan order, at least in Spain, doing penance for the sake of being able to carry out the reform and have it be the most effective reform possible. So there's a lot of different intentions that a person can have in performing penance. Penance is something that has been with us even before the time of Christ. Christ himself performed penance. There have been an unknown number of people over 2,000 years that have performed a lot of penance. It's quite interesting because once you go outside of the Catholic Church, the idea of penance is greatly dismissed. I don't say entirely, but greatly dismissed. People don't understand the need for it because in their mind, Christ died for us once, and therefore there's no need of penance. There's really no need in the mind of some people to even express sorrow for their sins. Two ideas that are very wrong. You see, when Christ died on the cross, he redeemed man. He made it possible for someone to go to heaven. There's no guarantee that any one person would go to heaven. Although there have been some saints who were told before they died that they were going to go directly to heaven because they had lived such a holy life, and usually with that holy life included doing penance. One should not be afraid of doing penance, but you have to measure it. The Church generally tells Catholics, when it speaks of penance, there are many different things that one can do, but the Church is always very cautious about allowing someone to do something that would harm their health. In the case of someone like St. Peter, certainly his superiors knew of the penances and the mortifications he performed, but someone like him was given extraordinary graces. And therefore the superiors understood this, and they allowed it. And of course, probably in some point in his life, he was the superior. He was Father General. usually of a local community. He did not reach the position of Minister General, which is the top position in the Franciscan order. But the point is this: his great desire to do penance from a very young age, from the time he entered at the age of 16, he apparently began to do penances right away, which is quite something, because when you're young like that, you don't always think of the need for penance, especially great penance. But every once in a while, you have an individual who, spiritually speaking, is already ahead in that sense. They already understand the need to do penance for themselves, but also for the church and for the world in general. We don't know the effect that the penances and mortifications and the prayers of St. Peter had on the world at that time. But you can be sure that it was of such a nature that there was a lot of good that came as a result of these penances. Even in the 21st century, we must keep in mind that penance and mortification are needed, not just for the individuals, but for the world as a whole. When we look at the present condition of the world, we see a lot of chaos. We see a war that's going on between good and evil. And if what the Blessed Mother is any indication of how effective penance can be, she told the children at Fatima, 1917, that she wanted the message spread to do prayer and penance in order to avoid World War II. Obviously, there wasn't enough prayer and penance. But the point here is that if there would have been enough people that would have been doing these things, a world war could have been prevented. And the world's going to look at that and they're going to scoff at it. How can prayer and penance prevent a war? It really comes back to the conversion of hearts and minds and souls. Because through prayer, through penance, people can change. This has been shown many times over. And more than likely, more than we will ever know, because how many people change quietly, unknown to the world. We live in a very different world today because you have far too many people who want the world to know about anything and everything that they do. So they put it on social media. The true saint will have no part of that. They will, at least not in a superficial manner. Yes, it's true that social media provides different platforms in order to preach the gospel, to put sermons up, even to stream Mass. So there is good in that regard. But we must understand that even with all of this, and especially considering the condition of the church today, there is very much a need for the individual to do penance. Penance is something that, from a physical standpoint, it goes against the individual, because we usually are concerned with taking care of ourselves. And penance works against that. But then again, it is a spiritual thing which one must agree to do, have a desire to do, and to do it gladly, for the sake of their own soul and the souls of others. So with St. Peter, we have a wonderful example of the desire to pray, to do penance for the salvation of his own soul, as well as the souls of others.